Welcome to the Emisarios Unidos de Luz channel. If you enjoy this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now, let's start with the story. I grew up in a family that always loved, cared for, and provided for me. Although my parents emphasized the importance of education, without the means to pay for college, my dream of obtaining a diploma seemed unlikely, even though part of me believed that through luck or divine providence, I would one day achieve my goal. With my dream constantly in my thoughts, my desires and impatience clouded my ability to clearly discern between divine providence and expediency, and owing to that precarious combination, I made reckless decisions in pursuit of realizing my goals. In zealous pursuit of my dream, albeit against my better judgment and conscience, I worked as an escort, believing that would solve my financial problems. The relief I felt from being able to meet my financial obligations seemed to overshadow my moral dilemma. However, like all slippery slopes, one perilous choice makes it easier to acquiesce to the increasingly risky decisions that follow. Working the job added a whole new dimension to my social life, exposing me to a broad variety of people whom I wouldn't encounter, much less choose to associate with, in my otherwise humdrum life. Those dubious individuals, my clients, and I would go to parties where we would smoke, drink alcohol, and consume substances that I, in my youthful innocence, had once disdained. As I grew increasingly estranged from the innocence of my youth, I became lost to myself, to the point where nothing seemed too abhorrent to refuse, even if being so accommodating was simply to keep my clients happy. As that affable and amenable person, I would stay overnight at party places and have sex with strangers that agreed to pay me, and as I closed the door on those high-minded values I grew up with, I opened the door to my power of seduction as a stripper. As a star of the strip joint stage, the applause I received as my popularity grew provided the, albeit ephemeral, solace I came to depend on, serving as both my consolation and compensation for the growing sense of emptiness I felt after bidding farewell to the goodness and sweetness embodied in the person of virtue I once was. I would like to tell you that I earned my degree and left that life behind, but my initial expedient choice became the catalyst for my demise as I faced the consequences of my reliable impetuousness. On that fateful night, I was lying in bed after an evening of celebration when my breathing became labored. As I struggled to inhale, the world around me started to blur and darken at the edges of my vision, and I began to lose consciousness. Suddenly, I found myself in an expanse of eerie darkness, surrounded by sinister, twisted, demonic figures lurking in the shadows. Those demons, silent attendants of the abyss, guided me through various wards to bear witness to the unimaginable horrors wrought upon those condemned to an eternity of agonizing torture and suffering. As the anguished wails of tormented souls echoed through the somber, flame-lit ambience, I knew with absolute certainty that I was indeed in hell. In the shadows cast by those baleful flames, I could see the silhouettes of souls enduring a variety of unspeakable tortures. For a while, I stood and watched as the towering tongues of fire cast dreary shadows upon hell's rocky landscape and the walls of its corridors, flames that seemed to dance in celebration of the ever-intensifying shrieks of hell's despairing indwellers. As I wandered through the macabre landscape, my demon escort suddenly vanished from sight, leaving me alone in the oppressive gloom. However, the terror I experienced was far from over, as I became increasingly unnerved by the unearthly screeches that heightened my awareness of the torment enveloping that infernal realm. Although the atmosphere resonated with the collective clamor of the damned, I was able to discern that the denizens of Abaddon were subjected to a hierarchy of torment commensurate with the type and depth of their transgressions. From the haunting whispers of regret to the guttural yowls of those enduring indescribable agony, I could sense that the punishment inflicted upon souls grew increasingly severe at ever deeper levels of the arcane abyss. The inability to confirm what I sensed, however, only heightened the visceral horror I felt and kept me imprisoned in a state of relentless trepidation. As I listened to their screeches, my attention was suddenly drawn to the queer movement of souls, who seemed to be dancing in excruciating agony to an unearthly, horrendous beat. It was then that an apparition with the features of an angel appeared beside me. With a sorrowful expression, the angel proceeded to explain the reason behind the horrible suffering levied against the souls in our midst. The music that was once a part of their earthly lives is responsible for their eternal suffering. Sadly, these souls have harmonized their energy with the deleterious notes of the music they habitually listened to, music that resonated with the darker parts of their souls and now haunts and harasses them through the strange and eerie melodies you hear. As that blood-curdling din wraps around them, it reminds them of the tunes that influenced them in life, shackling them in a never-ending dance of pain, the angel explained. The music of certain performers is charged with a hidden seductive power that influences listeners to give in to temptation and indulge their instinctual nature, the angel explained. As I listened to his explanation, I reflected on how the music I habitually listened to, with its catchy beats and lyrics, influenced my thoughts and tempted me to act against my better judgment or higher ideals. Thinking they were just enjoying music, these souls ended up following a darker influence that urged them to act against their higher knowing, the angel continued. As those pitiable souls pleaded for mercy and an opportunity to atone for their sins, I observed the sorrow and remorse in their agonized expressions. As I explored the various precincts of that unholy place, I realized that every soul residing in the realm of the damned yearned for a chance to atone. With great remorse and lamentation, each soul recounted the decisions that led to their eternal damnation, imploring mercy and a way out of their predicament. Yet every plea blended with the cries of countless others begging for the same reprieve, in a place where mercy and second chances were not granted. I saw in their expressions of anguish the horrible torture wreaked upon those who had given in to the temptation of fornication. Those wretched souls were condemned to contend with terrifying visions of their worst fears coming to life, nightmares reflecting the evil acts they performed during their lives, nightmares that were both obscene and surreal. It was conveyed to me that the punishment for fornication went beyond physical pain, reaching deep into the soul of the sufferer and tearing them apart in a never-ending cycle of fear and regret. I listened as the agonizing shrieks of those souls pierced the suffocating ether of that accursed place, and their mournful weeping rang out like songs of regret. It was then that I began to cry tears of sorrow and regret, imagining that I, too, was destined to suffer the same fate. As I cried, a light appeared, and from that light, a voice spoke, telling me that I had been given another chance. As the voice delivered its decree, I felt an invisible hand reach out and grab me, pulling me from that prison of despairing gloom. As I left that realm of sadness and despair, I found myself suddenly in a place between places, before waking up in my body. When I opened my eyes, it occurred to me that I was in a hospital bed, observing the expressions of surprise and amazement on the faces of the doctors and nurses, who later that day explained to me that I was nearly declared